Hey everyone, Pastor Brandon here with Calvary Chapel Hemet, bringing you today's Heart to Home daily devotional. As most of you guys know, we have a midweek Bible study here at the church every Wednesday night. We call it Fusion Fellowship. And for the last few months, we've actually been making our way verse by verse and chapter by chapter through the book of Acts. And the last 2 weeks, we've been taking a look at the Apostle Paul's first missionary journey. And there's something that I wanted to show you guys out of a few verses in that book. Paul had been making his way through the region that we know as Galatia in our Bibles. And as he went town by town, he encountered some real major situations. For example, Paul and Barnabas had stopped at a place called Antioch, and it was there that they had stepped into a synagogue, and Paul preached a sermon that, well, it really upset the Jews, but it brought many Gentiles to Christ. And in Acts chapter 13, verses 49 through 50, it says, "And the word of the Lord was being spread throughout all the region. But the Jews stirred up the devout and prominent women and chief men of the city, raised up persecution against Paul and Barnabas, and expelled them from their region." In other words, they were ran out of town. All the important people of the city ganged up and expelled them from that city. The next place they went was a place called Iconium. It wasn't very far from Antioch, but there at Iconium, Paul again shared the truth of Jesus Christ. And the city had actually become divided, the Bible tells us. Many had sided with the Jews and many with Paul and Barnabas. But in Acts 14, verses 5 through 7, it says, "And when a violent attempt was made by both the Jews, or Gentiles and Jews, with their rulers to abuse and stone them, they became aware of it and fled to Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, and to the surrounding region, and they were preaching the gospel there." And so as you see, they gathered together to stone and abuse Paul, but he fled to a place called Lystra and Derbe. Again, Paul continued in the work that the Lord had put before him, and he again preached Christ to the pagan Gentiles. They actually began to praise him and Barnabas as gods. They called them Zeus and Hermes, and they were going to try and sacrifice animals to them. And of course, Paul rushed in and put a stop to that, daring not to take God's glory. But in Acts chapter 14, verses 19 and 20, we read, "Then the Jews from Antioch and Iconium came there, and having persuaded the multitudes, they stoned Paul and dragged him out of the city, supposing he was dead. However, when the disciples gathered around him, Paul rose up and went back into the city. And the next day he departed with Barnabas to Derbe." So Jews from the last two cities where Paul had fled followed him down to Lystra and stirred the people up there. And they actually stoned Paul, that's what we read, until they thought he was dead. It says they supposed he was dead. They drug him out of the city and they left him. But Paul got up off the ground and went right back into that city, didn't he? So let's look at these three situations. The first, he was expelled out of the city. The second, he was made aware of the people's plot to abuse and stone him, so he was able to flee. And the third, he was actually stoned until the people thought he was dead, and it's quite possible he did die for a little while. But this is what I want us to see this morning. Okay, it's found in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 10 through 11. Many years after these events we just read about in Acts, Paul was writing to his son in the faith, and he speaks about these events. This is what he has to say. He says to Timothy, "But you have carefully followed my doctrine, my manner of life, purpose, faith, long-suffering, love, perseverance, persecutions, afflictions, which happened to me at Antioch, Iconium, and Lystra, so those three places we just talked about in Acts. What persecutions I endured, and here it is, and out of them all the Lord delivered me. How did Paul get out of those cities that we read about in Acts alive? He says, out of all of them, the Lord delivered me. And so here's the two things I want to point out before we wrap it up this morning. Number one, oftentimes when we're going through something that's scary, something that's painful, it is the Lord delivering us from something else. Paul fled for his life. An entire city was running after him, trying to kill him. He was stoned, to death, basically. Something definitely painful. But in the midst of this, the Lord was delivering Paul from something. Maybe you're going through something fearful and painful. Always remember that the Lord is behind the scenes at work, guys. And here's the second thing. A.W. Tozer once said that the servant of God in the will of God is invincible. Paul had work to do. He was called to share the good news of Jesus Christ to the lost world, to be the apostle to the Gentiles. And as long as Paul was obedient and faithful to his calling, to the work that the Lord had for him, he was invincible because God would deliver him over and over from every situation that threatened him. That's what we just seen in those verses in Acts we read. God would deliver him until his mission was completed. As always, guys, it's a blessing being able to go through the Word with you, talk about the Lord together. Looking forward to next time we're together. Hey, God bless you guys.